Okay, we have finally got to the end of the opening statements at the Undercover Policing Inquiry Tranche 3 Phase 1. This afternoon was mostly Kirsten Heaven, but then Lydia Dagostino, who is the one of the solicitors, strangely got to cosplay as a barrister and actually speak to the inquiry directly, which was a first. Yeah, so it was the last of the opening statements. It was on behalf of the non-state, non-police corps participants. Just an hour and a half. There were a lot of technical problems, hence Lydia stepping in. We just kept cutting out, I mean, this is the ridiculous nature of the inquiry happening virtually. These sort of things will happen, though. I mean, I would say that plenty of problems happen at the inquiry, which aren't technical like that. Kirsten started off by saying it was welcome that the Met Police had apologised over its and accepted it had failed over its deployment of undercover police, and not just in hindsight, but also with the things of the time. It was questioned whether they got far enough. They'd gone far enough. They haven't named who was directing and tasking these legal operations, and I mean until they do that and like kind of really get the heart of the political pressure that came from the Home Office on the SDS for where it was deploying, then it's pretty hollow. It was pointed out that senior Met Police, including commissioners, visited the SDS safe house regularly, lavished praise on the SDS. The idea that there was any secrecy through the higher levels of the Met Police leadership and the existence of the Spycops is a nonsense, an absolute nonsense, and should be rejected out of hand. I mean, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that there was really direct targeting of Spycops officers by the Met Police leadership, but specifically around the Stephen Lawrence inquiry and the tasking of HN81. That's coming in Dave Hagan, one of the officers who has managed to weasel his way out of giving evidence at this inquiry, which is infuriating. He has pointed out that not only the Home Office knew, the Home Secretary knew, the Prime Minister knew, the Cabinet Office took a great interest in SDS reporting. I mean, this obviously is a complete contrast with the bullshit we heard 2 days ago from the Home Office opening statement, where they just suggested they had no knowledge whatsoever. It was said that politicians need to come and give oral evidence on their role in the deployment of undercover police and their political motivations for that targeting. We talked about the SDS closing report that was published in June 2009. Just pointing out really that this report really is like kind of goes to the heart of what we know about the SDS and why they need to be shut down, and like the failure to publish this unredacted at the time is a real it's a real failure of the inquiry in general. Why not? Why wasn't this disclosed earlier in an unredacted form? Talked about the extensive use of code names by the SDS officers and how this goes back to what we were talking to earlier about the exaggerated perception of risk that came across very strongly in James Scobie's opening remarks on behalf of Youth Against Racism in Europe and others. It added to the secretive nature of the work. Often the names were used to mock their targets, and just that culture. Talked about James Thompson's activities and how just one of the most erroneous examples of an undercover officer left to his own devices over many years. And the fact that he lied to the inquiry about the fact that he had sexual relationships, denying all of it, and then later on admitting to it. His excuse for lying was that he fell back on his instinct to lie, which I mean really calls into question what kind of bullshit we're going to hear from him when he is put on the stand in a couple of weeks' time. We were reminded of a comment from DCI HN36 Mike Dell, who identified that James Thompson had an inclination to admit only that with which he is confronted. We saw lots of there was clear examples of undercover officers' deployments that were unlawful in that jurisdiction. In the closing report, it said that the authorisations were just rubber stamped, I mean, that this is like shown really blatantly with HN16 James Thompson and HN60 Dave Evans's authorizations, which were exactly the same words, just a copy and paste job. Classic. Yeah, so Dave Hagan, HN81, reported extensively on justice campaigns and discussed all the details of this with his handlers, but like, and was given direction for where to focus, which that really undermines this idea that it was collateral intrusion. There were a lot of technical problems. It got very choppy from here on in. So apologies if I'm missing sort of key points. And not just, there's obviously things you hear, but when you're trying to like follow it and there's chopping up, it means taking notes is difficult. Yeah, so I mean, it was just saying that any sort of attempts to justify the infiltration of community groups should be treated with skepticism. The prevalence of unlawful deployments really need to be seen in the context of a unit that was desperate to protect its survival. Yeah, then Lydia took over around this point, which was really nice to see. So there was a lot of questions need to be asked about the expenses, overtime, and the other perks of being in the SDS. This is, a time of, real extravagance and opulence by the unit. This really lavish social calendar they had, multiple trips to Amsterdam, to Las Vegas, Christmas parties at hotels outside of London, going paintballing in Birmingham, day trips to Hastings and the Cotswolds. Yeah, there was an internal audit. There was 2 internal audits of the unit, once in 97 and then once in 2003. It was pointed out in the second audit that the recommendations that had been supposedly put in place after the 97 audit had been abandoned already. So, I mean, even with the very light touch sort of regulation that the unit had, they weren't following it. I mean, we've heard from, like, it was quoted from Peter Francis, that the unethical nature of the unit, if it had been run on ethical considerations, it wouldn't have been able to operate. It would have been closed down. But more about how Bob Lambert, who was a manager, was referred to as the linchpin of the unit. That DCI Edmondson, who was supposedly in charge, was largely ignored by the staff because he was considered a failed back office boy. He'd never been in the field, so the fact that he was in charge now really didn't mean he had any respect. Yeah, there was quotes from the closing report that the ends do not justify the means, and rarely, if ever, whatever cost. Obviously, famously, the SDS's motto was "by any means necessary," which obviously they'd stolen from Malcolm X. It was pointed out that so many of the reports signed off by managers used racist, misogynistic, and outdated language right up until the 90s. The fact that all the managers were white men may have added to this. There was also evidence that being an agent provocateur was sanctioned formally. There was mentioning of a document that explained how an animal rights operation, an officer could go from being an observer to being a direct participant in some sort of attack. There was no consideration about legal professional privilege, and that many of the undercover officers reported on that as a matter of course. About the blacklisting, just how extensive that was. That one activist was blacklisted because of his enthusiasm for trade unionism. It was criticised that Dave Smith is not being called to give evidence at the inquiry, despite the fact being secretary of the Blacklist Support Group and ideally placed to assist the inquiry and understanding why, how the blacklisting happened. Yeah, it was just really like kind of signed off with sort of reminding the inquiry of the importance of getting to the substantial truth, not just like some sort of surface level truth, but how it came to be that the Undercover Policing Unit continued through all these continuous crises and scandals that they were involved in. And that's the end of the opening statements. Just on a personal note, covering the opening statements is one of the hardest bits. There's a lot less detail in it, and it's more difficult to kind of keep concentrated on. Also, I'm at home, as you can tell by the staircase behind me. So I'll be going down to London tomorrow to attend the in-person hearings, which there is no hearing tomorrow. Initially, Phelan was meant to be giving evidence. He's not. He's managed to get out of it on ill health grounds. He was one of the managers from the Tranche 2 period. He managed to get out of giving evidence during Tranche 2. It was rescheduled and he's got out of it permanently now. which says it all about the nature of the inquiry. But I will be there on Friday. Sarah, who was deceived into a long-term intimate relationship by James Thompson, will be giving evidence in person. We'll have a protest outside at 9 a.m. Please come along if you can. I'll be staying in London then for the duration. On the Sunday, we've got everything you want to know about the inquiry but afraid to ask event at the Mayday Rooms, run by the Undercover Research Group. Come along to that if you're able to, if you find it useful. And then the more hearings start then on Monday. I want a complete rundown of it now. Thanks to everybody who's been sharing these live videos, and particularly the reels, the daily updates, what we learned today, the videos that we've been doing, which have had subtitles on and stuff. I mean, as you can tell, I'm not any expert at social media, but I'm trying to produce something that's easy to share, that people aren't necessarily been following proceedings that closely can kind of get their head around what I'm on about. I was very aware that, like previously, a lot of my coverage requires a lot of context. So hopefully those videos kind of give it a little bit of context and kind of still give you some facts about what we've learned that day. I'll be doing one of those later on. I'm going to do a Twitter Spaces, but I might stop doing the Twitter Spaces. It might be just one too many things, and the audience for that doesn't tend to be that big. But we'll see. Possibly I'll do them, but they'll be just a bit shorter, a bit less detailed. Maybe just encourage others to kind of take part in them a bit more. Let's find out. I don't know. See how it goes once the in-person hearings start. As is the difference between the opening statements hearings and the evidential hearings is so marked. I don't know how the coverage is going to continue. So thanks very much. If you're able to support me, you can do so on Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/Tom B. Fowler. Really makes all the difference. I do get a very small amount of funding from the Campaign Opposing Police Surveillance and Police Spies Out of Lives, which makes it possible for me to attend, but it doesn't make it possible for me to kind of enjoy life at all. So if you want to, give me the opportunity to buy a chocolate bar every now and again, that would be great. All right, cheers for now, and I'll see you all on Friday outside the IDRC, just by the steps of St Paul's Cathedral. All right, bye for now.